This video is sponsored by Premium Sound, one of the UK's premier dealers located in Kensington, London, with an online store carrying a comprehensive inventory to cater for a variety of needs. For more details, click the link in the description. How many of us have streamers where we don't use the built-in DACs? Seems a bit of a waste, doesn't it? Streaming transport may be a much better idea. There are a couple of accessibly priced ones like the Primer MP5 that sells for £549. As you can see, it has pretty basic connectivity, but I have it on good authority that it's a decent performing device. Pickings are a bit slim for dedicated streaming transports below £2,000 if I'm honest, but they are out there. The product I'm reviewing today is from a company that's been on a bit of an interesting journey. A decade ago, Volumio started offering an operating system optimized for audio on Raspberry Pi type devices. They went on to be an OEM for manufacturers such as iFi, Project, Music Fidelity, Key and many others. But now Volumio produce their own hardware as well. Their portfolio is slowly increasing. Currently there are 6 devices on offer, including a streaming amplifier called the Integro, the Primo streaming DAC and the Rivo streaming transport that I'm reviewing today. It sells for less than £1,000 and you might be surprised to learn how many of us would be better off with a dedicated streaming transport. The Volumio Rivo is a simple looking device in an attractive aluminium case with a solo button on the front fascia to take the unit in and out of standby. There's no screen and no remote control. Hand assembled in Florence, Italy with a retail price of £849. Measurements are 270 by 150 by 50 millimeters and 2.25 kilograms. That's 10.6 by 5.9 by 2.0 inches and 5 pounds. The Rivo has a USB 3.0 port for fast access to media stored on external drives. It will stream wirelessly or via an Ethernet LAN connection. A micro SD card can be inserted with stored music, and the HDMI port below is an interesting feature. It can be used with a TV or monitor to display the user interface. Touchscreens will permit interaction with the device without having to rely upon the app. There are monitors available on Amazon these days for as little as £60. Additional USB 2.0 ports are provided to attach even more storage devices. The AES, EBU and coaxial digital outputs are galvanically isolated, and the dedicated USB output to connect to external DACs is also heavily filtered. The standard wall-wart power supply is rated at 5 volts and 3 amps. The Rivo streaming engine top left is a Cardus VIM 3L single board computer with an Amlogic S905D3 processor and a quad-core Cortex A55 CPU. There's 2 GB of RAM and 16 GB of flash storage. The main board houses extensive power filtering based on a chain of inductors and electrolytic capacitors. The power supply is separated out for each section, with one dedicated to the internal clock and its stabilizer. The digital outputs are also well spaced out to minimize interference. The optional Lineo 5 power supply sells for £349, but is discounted when bought with the streamer. The casework is sturdy and functional. It's a shame that it looks out of place when located adjacent to the Rivo, so it's best tucked away until Volumio considered an updated industrial design. No complaints on the inside. That's a 120 VA toroidal transformer to power a streamer, with 4 10,000 microfarad Nova audio grade capacitors on the first stage, and another 4 3,600 microfarad Nishikon capacitors on the second stage. 54,400 microfarads in total puts many other manufacturers to shame. Volumio supports many of the usual culprits for streaming music. In addition to the ones listed here, Spotify is available via a plugin, Apple Music via AirPlay, but not Amazon Music as yet. Tidal Connect, Spotify Connect and Roon are for those who prefer to use proprietary streaming apps rather than the Volumio OS, and I'd expect the new Qobuz Connect to become available soon. I know some third-party devices have had issues running Volumio OS, experiencing signal dropouts, but I've encountered no problems with it running on its in-house hardware. The operating system has proved to be both responsive and reliable. It installed my 2TB Western Digital hard drive successfully. However, the operating system is not as intuitive to use as Eversolo's or WiiM's, and it takes some time to get used to where the functions are located. My main quibbles are that when selecting tracks from a playlist, you have to double tap before it starts playing. One tap would be preferable. Also, there's no quick way to slide down the list alphabetically. You have to scroll through, which is cumbersome. I'd like to see these issues fixed with a firmware update, but they are minor gripes. Volumio OS works well. The Rivo is a remarkable sounding streaming transport. It offers such a clean signal to the external DAC, free from any particular coloration. But if you think it's all ones and zeros, and internal as well as external sources of noise and distortion such as jitter don't count, then I'd urge you to stop watching now. Before I get into the ribs of how this Volumio player sounds, let me just briefly explain why this £300 device is my reference digital source below £1,000. The Bluesound Node Nano is a no-nonsense streamer that has an excellent built-in DAC based upon an ESS Sabre 9039 Q2M chip, but it also makes an excellent streaming transport to connect to external DACs. Just make sure you use optical or coaxial outputs, not USB, which sounds awful. It's fine for connecting external drives to the USB port, but it's not been optimized to provide a clean output. Whether it's used as a streaming DAC or as a transport, the little Nano sounds better than a lot of digital sources that cost more. For example, these three CD players are either less resolving or less natural sounding. The £849 Marantz CD60, the Arcam CD5 that sells for £699, and the beautifully constructed diminutive SMSL PL200, which is currently available on Amazon for £499. Both the previous generation Eversolo DMP A8 and Bluesound's own Node X skew tonality more than the Nano. They can't match its ability to pull information from recordings either. The fantastic WiiM Ultra offers more connectivity and a colour LCD display, but also can't compete with the Bluesound Node Nano for sound quality. The point is, it's unusual for me to come across something below £1,000 that can match the sonic ability of the Nano, let alone beat it, but the Rivo sounds better, a lot better. The Volumio player is in a totally different class. The soundstage is far more expansive and precise. The only area akin to the Nano is the even-handed tonality, but there's just so much more micro detail reproduced by the Rivo. You name it, bass definition, mid-range transient attack, top-end extension, airiness and refinement. It's the best I've heard by a country mile for this price. The similarly priced Bluesound Node Icon represents great value for money as a digital hub, with HDMI ARC and everything bar the kitchen sink included as far as connections are concerned. I'd buy the Icon over the Rivo for the extra features it offers, but not for sound quality. It has a fuller mid-range which imparts a warmer coloration that some people might prefer, but it's comfortably outclassed here in all areas of fidelity. Time for this week's music recommendation. Before Van Morrison became a globally known figure, he went over to New York in 1967 to record some sessions. There were numerous fallings out, so the second disc is full of nonsense to fulfill contractual obligations. But the first 11 tracks include some of my favourites, such as TB Sheets, Row Row Rosie and Who Drove the Red Sports Car. They're fresh and intimate, thanks to Van and great musicians daring to take risks. Back to the review, and it's hard for me to criticise the Rivo because it does everything so well. Instruments are well separated, nothing sounds artificial or draws your attention to a particular part of the frequency spectrum, and dynamic shifts are dealt with assurance. Let's up the ante. I spent ages doing A-B comparisons with my Auralic Aries G1, which may be a couple of generations old, but is still an excellent streaming transport. There's hardly any difference in sonic presentation in terms of the sound field that's created and the amount of information that's pulled from recordings. The only tangible difference that I can discern is that my old Auralic player has a slightly fuller, richer tone, which I prefer. But that's when using the Rivo with the standard wall wart power supply. With the £349 Lineo 5 providing the juice, the performance changes. taking sound quality beyond the reach of the Auralic Aries G1. I'd still like a little bit more acoustic mass in the bass and mid-range, which is what my Auralic brings, but everything is cleaner and more focused through the Rivo when fed through its linear power supply. The most obvious improvements are in bass definition and mid-range transient attack, but the soundstage is also more open, with performers more secure in their location. Auralic's new S1 series of products may offer similar performance, however it was too long ago and too much has changed in my system since to comment on how the Vega S1 and matching S1 power supply would fare as a streaming transport. That Auralic 2-box combination costs £3,000, over twice the price of the Rivo Lineo 5 combination. I suspect a lot of the extra resources have gone into aesthetics and providing fancier casework rather than improved sound quality. So what more do you need to know to get the best out of this Volumio player? Different digital outputs don't tend to sound the same. The signal path isn't the same, although in the Rivo's case I'm talking about the difference between very good, excellent and exceptional. Coaxial is not quite as clean as USB, whilst AES EBU improves resolution and opens up the soundstage even more. I've already commented on the UI earlier, so I don't want to bore you or myself going through the entire menu system. They are comprehensive. Here's a quick summary. There's plenty for the tech-savvy individual to explore, including determining what music sources you want active and disabled, setting playback options, volume control and audio sampling rates, adjusting settings for the HDMI video output and the hardware of the unit itself, as well as plugins for the DSP suite and other software that comes as standard. As for partnering equipment, in systems where the amplifier and speakers retail for less than £1,000, you can get away without buying the optional linear power supply to keep the purse strings tight. In stock form, I can clearly appreciate the improvement in sound quality the Rivo brings over the Bluesound Node Nano when hooked up to the £699 Audiolab 6000A Mark II and the £799 Monitor Audio Silver 100 7Gs. Even in my mid-tier setup comprising the £3,250 Hegel H190 and the £1,800 Quad Revela ones, the Rivo with a standard power supply performs admirably, although adding the Lineo 5 brings noticeable improvements. However, my vintage Exposure 21 Pre and 18 Super monoblocks paired with the £5,000 Alta Audio Alyssas offer greater resolution and spatial ability. Here there's no going back to the Rivo in stock form once heard with the optional power supply. At £349, the Lineo 5 offers an exceptional value performance upgrade. I'd be tempted to buy it regardless of the quality of the equipment I was putting downstream just to future-proof my system. Enough. Time to wrap things up. For the second time in 2 years, a no-frills streaming device shows a clean pair of heels to the competition. The fact that there's no hardware to power screens, feed a remote control or superfluous buttons can't be a coincidence. All the resources have been focused on sonic performance, resulting in the Volumio Rivo being class redefining, competing with the best streaming transports at twice its price. Add the Lineo 5 power supply and it surpasses even that. I get that some people will want more connectivity, better functionality, and there are streamers out there with superior user interfaces. But if you're like me and all that comes secondary to sound quality, this is comfortably the best streamer I've heard for the money. The Volumio Rivo streaming transport gets an outstanding from this channel. That's as close as it gets to a rave review on this channel, guys. There is a Rivo Plus model with an upgraded clock and I2S connection. I wonder how good that sounds. And that brings me on to the question for today. What are you itching to get your hands on to Audition? Please let me know in the comment section. I'm sure you know what to do by now if you want to support me here and what I do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, British Audiophile, signing off.